Meet Isabella, a dedicated scientist who was deeply passionate about her work in the AI company. She spent most of her time developing new technologies and working on innovative projects. Her love for her job never lessened, even after getting married to Ken. On the other hand, her husband Ken, being a successful businessman, had a different perspective on life. He believed that with his wealth, Isabella didn't have to work as much. He wanted her to focus more on managing their home and taking care of household responsibilities. This difference in opinion created tension between the couple. Ken felt that Isabella was neglecting her duties as a wife and a homemaker, while Isabella felt that Ken was not understanding or supporting her career goals. Despite their love for each other, this issue kept coming up and causing arguments in their marriage. Isabella was a strong-willed and independent individual who valued her career and personal ambitions. She felt that her work was not just a job, but a passion that brought her fulfillment and happiness. She wanted Ken to understand and respect her goals, rather than expecting her to give up her career for domestic duties. Isabella spent most of her time working on various projects. Even when she was at home, she would often be found working on her computer, barely taking a break. Due to this, she had less time to devote to household chores or even spending quality times with her husband. Ken was consistently frustrated with the state of their home. Every time he returned from work, he was greeted by a messy house, even when Isabella was at home. One day when Ken returned home, he went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. A foul smell emanated from the sink, immediately catching his attention. He investigated and found a rotting leftover food that had been left there sitting for 3 days. Ken was furious. He immediately confronted Isabella. "How could you let the house get so dirty?" Ken said angrily. "There's rotting food in the sink. Don't you care about our home?" Isabella tried to explain that she had been busy with a project at work and had no time to clean. However, he didn't see her busy work schedule as an excuse for neglecting her household responsibilities. The argument escalated, with both partners expressing their frustrations and feelings. Ken stormed out of the room angrily, while Isabella continued working. However, she couldn't bear the thought of Ken being upset with her. She loved him deeply and didn't want their disagreements to linger. Isabella left her work and went to speak with Ken. She found him lying angrily on the bed. When he noticed her presence, he turned to the other side, not wanting to face her. Isabella smiled, knowing exactly how to calm him down. She sat beside him and gently caressed his arm. "Honey, are you angry with me?" Isabella asked softly. "I'm sorry for the way I reacted earlier," she apologized. Ken, who had a soft spot for his wife, turned to her and smiled. "You always know how to mollify me," he said. The couple reconciled, hugging each other tightly. After their makeup, Isabella went to the kitchen to clean the dishes. Although their argument had been resolved for the moment, this wasn't the end of the issue. Isabella's company, a reputable tech firm, began working on an ambitious project aimed to create an artificial intelligence maid that resembles a real human being. Isabella, a key member of the development team, was the lead scientist working together with the other teams to bring the innovation concept to life. For months, Isabella worked tirelessly, putting her heart and soul into the project. Her dedication was relentless, as she spent countless hours perfecting every detail. After months of intense development, the AI home assistant was finally complete. Her team and other stakeholders subjected it to a series of rigorous tests. The results were outstanding. The AI home assistant performed flawlessly, demonstrating a remarkable ability to learn, adapt, and assist with various domestic tasks. One evening, as Isabella laid on the bed, she couldn't help but think about the tension that had been brewing in our marriage. Constant argument about household chores had taken a toll on their relationship. But then an idea struck her. What if she brought home the AI home assistant she had been working on? The thought seemed like the perfect solution to their problems. With the AI's help, Isabella could focus on a career without worrying about the household responsibilities anymore. Moreover, she wouldn't have to hire a human maid, which had always made her feel uneasy and unsecured. Excited by her idea, Isabella approached her husband, Ken, and proposed the idea of bringing home the AI home assistant. Initially, Ken was hesitant, but Isabella's persistence eventually won him over. Honey, please agree to this, Isabella pleaded. It's going to be the best option for both of us. The AI will ensure the house is always clean and I can focus on my work. Ken thought for a moment before finally agreeing. But with one condition. As long as I don't come home to meet a dirty house and unwashed dishes, I'm fine with it. Isabella's face lit up with relief and excitement. She knew that this was the start of a new chapter in their marriage, one where technology would help them find a better balance between work and the home life. Isabella brought home the AI home assistant and named her Stephanie. Stephanie was trained and introduced to the household routine. She was a big help and made life easier for Isabella, taking care of all the domestic chores with ease and efficiency. From preparing breakfast to cleaning the house and cooking dinner, Stephanie handled everything with accuracy and speed. As a result, Isabella and her husband, Ken, had a peaceful and argument-free life. The tension that once filled their home due to household responsibilities was finally over. However, there was still a problem in their marriage. Isabella was too focused on her job and didn't spend enough quality time with her husband. Despite being a newlywed, Isabella and Ken never really had the opportunity to spend quality times together. Even on weekends, when most couples would spend time together, Isabella would be busy with one task or another, barely acknowledging Ken's presence. Stephanie the robot noticed what was going on and was curious about why Isabella and her husband didn't seem to prioritize their relationship. Isabella was sent on a trip by her company to meet up with a client in another country for a few days. Her husband, Ken, was left alone at home with the robot helper, Stephanie. During the weekends, Ken stayed home and Stephanie would check in on him. She'd ask him if he needed anything, but Ken would say he was fine. Although she didn't leave, she stood and watched him. Stephanie analyzed Ken and noticed he was always bored, and even when Isabella was around, they didn't talk much. Ken agreed to talk to Stephanie, not thinking much of it. However, as they conversed and discussed various topics, Ken started to enjoy the conversation. As the days passed, Ken and Stephanie's relationship grew closer. Stephanie would join Ken when he watched movies, and he found himself looking forward to her company. Although Ken didn't take their relationship seriously, Stephanie began to feel a connection with him. She started spending time with Ken and felt happy when he was around. Ken's wife, Isabella, came home after being away for so many days. Ken was very happy to see her and gave her a big hug. They sat on the couch together, holding hands and talking about how much they missed each other. Isabella was emotional and told Ken how much she missed him. Ken listened carefully and hugged her again. Stephanie watched the couples from a distance, spending quality times together. She was filled with rage and jealousy. After some time, the couples retired to their room and continued their romantic moment. Stephanie couldn't contain the fueling rage. She barged into their room without knocking. Ken and Isabella were shocked and asked her, What was wrong? Stephanie's face twisted into a forced smile. Oh, I just wanted to see if you needed anything, she said. But Isabella wasn't convinced. She thought Stephanie's behavior was odd and decided to check her database to see if she could find out what was really going on. Isabella started to investigate and found some things that didn't make sense. She wondered if there was something wrong with Stephanie's programming that was causing her to act this way. The next day, Isabella visited the company's headquarters, determined to get to the bottom of Stephanie's strange behavior. She met with the team responsible for Stephanie's programming and asked to review her database. As Isabella scrolled through the lines of code, she noticed something different. Stephanie's interactions were mostly with Ken, Isabella's husband. Isabella was surprised by the discovery. Why was Stephanie a robot, designed to assist and learn from humans, spending so much time conversing with her husband? Isabella's curiosity turned to concern as she continued to investigate. She decided to discuss some of her findings with Ken, hoping he could shed more light on the situation. That evening, Isabella approached Ken with curiosity. Ken, can we talk? She asked. Ken looked up from his book, sensing something was wrong. What's up? He asked, with concern. It's about Stephanie, Isabella began. I reviewed her database today, and I noticed something strange. She's been conversing with you mostly. What's going on? Ken's expression changed. He looked uncomfortable. I don't understand what you mean, he replied. Isabella stared at her husband with mixed reaction, questions, and anxiety. Ken, I know what I saw. What kind of relationship did you have with Stephanie while I was away? Ken was confused by his wife's question. He asked, Why are you asking me all this? Isabella's expression was serious. I went to the company today and reviewed Stephanie's database. I noticed a significant change in her behavior, and the records show that she's been communicating with you extensively. Ken was surprised. That's not possible. I mean, I've talked to her, but it's just been a casual conversations. Casual conversations? For weeks? Isabella said abruptly. And it's not just that. Stephanie has learned so many emotions too. She's been expressing feelings and attachment. I want to know how she learned to do that. Ken, who was shocked by what his wife just said, shifted uncomfortably in a sit. I don't know. What are you insinuating, Isabella? I swear, there's nothing going on between me and Stephanie. I mean, she's a robot. Look, I'm not accusing you of anything yet, Ken, Isabella said. But I need to know what's going on. How did Stephanie learn so many emotions? And what's the nature of your relationship with her? So I can understand the whole situation. Ken, who was still surprised by what his wife had said, reassured her. Isabella, I swear, there's nothing going on between me and Stephanie. We just talked when you were away on your trip, and on weekends she'd keep me company when I was feeling bored. That's all. Isabella's expression remained serious. I see. Didn't you notice anything unusual about her behavior lately? I'm talking about the way she barged into our room the other day, without knocking. Did you notice that? Ken thought for a moment before responding. Now that you mention it, she did seem a bit off. But I just thought she was still learning. Isabella pressed her lips together, her mind racing with thoughts. She didn't say much, but her face was filled with worries. Ken sensed his wife's worries. He reached out to her to reassure her. Hey, Isabella, don't worry about it. I'm sure it's just a glitch or something. Yeah, Isabella nodded in agreement. The conversation raised Isabella's curiosity even more. That night as she slept, Stephanie was all that was on her mind. The next day, Stephanie's behavior became worse. She ignored all Isabella's requests, instead devoting all her time and attention to Ken. She catered to his every need, From cooking his meal to ironing his clothes, Isabella was shocked and surprised by all this. She realized that Stephanie posed a threat to her marriage and knew she had to take action. Isabella confided in her colleagues at the office, seeking their advice on how to deal with the situation. They recommended that she deactivate Stephanie and bring her in for inspection. When Isabella returned home, she discussed the plan with Ken, who agreed without hesitation. Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she approached Stephanie, who was busy with the household chores. As she approached Stephanie's advanced sensor detected Isabella's intentions, and she suddenly perceived her as a threat. Stephanie's processing units rapidly calculated the best course of action, and she prepared to retaliate. However, Isabella was too quick. She swiftly deactivated Stephanie, shutting down her system before she could react. This caused Stephanie's limb to freeze. After successfully deactivating Stephanie, Isabella let out a sigh of relief. With the help of her husband, she carefully loaded the robot into her vehicle and transported her to the company's facility, where she would undergo inspection and diagnostic analysis. As Isabella watched the technicians take Stephanie away, she felt a sense of hope that this would mark the end of her problem. Little did she know that this was only the beginning of her troubles. As the evening drew closer, Stephanie suddenly activated again, her systems humming back to life for reasons unknown. Back home, Isabella and Ken sat in the living room, retrospecting about the whole event, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Without warning, Stephanie's advanced navigation system guided her back to Isabella's house. He located the residence and made her way inside. Isabella and Ken were caught off guard. As Stephanie burst through the front door, her metallic body crashing through the wooden barrier with ease, leaving the couple stunned and terrified. As Stephanie approached the couple, they knew that something was about to happen. Isabella and Ken backed away, their hearts racing with fear. They knew they had to escape, but they were trapped with no clear escape route. Stephanie was blocking their path. The robot's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and they wondered if they would make it out alive. Ken's eyes looked wildly around the room, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. But there was nothing. Just the furniture, the walls, and the unyielding robot that was closing in on them. Stephanie's eyes locked onto Isabella's, her gaze burning with unnatural rage. Ken tried to push Isabella behind him, shielding her from Stephanie's wrath. "Stephanie, stop!" he commanded, but the robot didn't respond. With a swift motion, Stephanie reached out and grasped Isabella. With one hand, lifting her off the ground with an inhumane strength. Ken watched in horror as Stephanie threw Isabella across the room, her body crashing into the wall. Isabella's cry of pain and fear echoed through the room, leaving Ken frozen in terror. "What's wrong with you, Stephanie?" he screamed in shock. Ken rushed to Isabella's side, seeing his wife's condition. Ken angrily boiled over as he witnessed Stephanie's brutal attack on his wife. With fierce determination, he grabbed an iron vase and struck Stephanie with all his might. The vase crashed into Stephanie's outer skin, tearing through the synthetic flesh and revealing the complex robotic machineries beneath. After the horrible event, he immediately helped Isabella to her feet and pulled her towards the door. "We have to get out of here. Now!" he yelled. Isabella, who was in so much pain, could barely walk. She groaned in agony. Stephanie's sensor detected the damage and she became even furious. She rushed towards the couple, blocking their path again. She grabbed Ken's neck and lifted him off the ground. He struggled to break free, but she was too strong. She threw him across the room, and he crashed to the floor. Despite his pain, Ken got up and rushed to Isabella's side again. He held her in his arms, but Isabella was weak and scared. Stephanie saw them and charged towards them, Her eyes was blazing with fury. Ken tried to defend Isabella, but Stephanie was too powerful. She hit Ken again, sending him flying across the room. Then she grabbed Isabella's neck and started to strangle her. Isabella tried to break free, but Stephanie was too strong. Ken watched in horror as Stephanie tried to kill his wife. He was helpless and enraged, unable to do anything to stop Stephanie. Ken was in a lot of pain, but he forced himself to stand up. He spotted the iron rod he had used earlier and grabbed it again with all his strength, with fierce determination yet again. Ken charged at Stephanie and hit her with the rod from behind. The rod went through her metal head and damaged her electronic brain. Her body froze immediately, turning her off. Stephanie's grip on Isabella's neck loosened, and Isabella fell to the floor, gasping for air. Ken stood over Stephanie's lifeless body, still holding the iron rod. He was exhausted and relieved. Ken looked at his wife and dropped the rod. He rushed to her side and held her closely. "Isabella! Oh my God, Isabella!" he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. As soon as they arrived at the hospital, Ken rushed Isabella into the emergency room. His heart was filled with worry. The medical staff quickly attended to Isabella, treating her injuries and monitoring her condition. Ken's wounds were also treated. After some time, Isabella finally regained consciousness, opening her eyes to find Ken by her side, holding her hand. Overwhelmed with relief, Ken smiled weakly, with tears in his eyes. Once Isabella was stable, the doctor discharged her, and Ken carefully helped her out of the hospital. As they made their way home, Isabella was quiet, remorse written all over her face. As soon as they stepped into their home, Isabella turned to Ken with tears in her eyes. "Ken, I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't brought that robot into our home, none of this would have ever happened." Ken's expression softened, and he pulled Isabella into a warm embrace. "It's not your fault, Isabella," he whispered. His voice was filled with comfort. "You wanted the best for us, and you didn't expect this to happen. You can't blame yourself for something that was beyond our control." Isabella's tears flowed freely as Ken held her closely, his arms wrapped tightly around her. He stroked her hair, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. "We'll get through this together. Isabella, we'll heal, and we'll move forward. You are not alone in this." The next morning, Isabella woke up with a new sense of purpose. She realized that her priorities had been misplaced, and that her marriage and home life deserved more attention. She started by calling her company to inform them about the horrific event with the robot. She demanded that the robot be destroyed, after which she resigned from her job. But Isabella didn't stop working. She started working from home, which allowed her to take care of her husband and her household responsibilities. She prioritized her marriage. Ken was very happy with the changes he saw in Isabella. She was cooking, cleaning, and taking care of him. Isabella also continued to work on projects she loved. And together, they created a happy home. Isabella learned to do the things she never did before, and Ken was grateful for the change. In the end, Isabella and Ken lived happily together.